Okay, you sliding thingamajig. I want my move to begin from here, point it this way, make sure you get that, and then you move here, but you still keep pointed that way. Did you get that? Okay, back to 1 now. No idea why I'm talking to a slider, would not recommend it, they don't really talk back. But anyway, off you go. This is the iFootage Shark Slider Nano. It's a little different from your typical slider, so there's a few things about this slider you should probably know about before you consider getting one. Things like how this was designed to be a fully motorized slider. There are many hand-driven sliders out there that have the option to be motorized by attaching a motor module, but this one was essentially designed around its built-in motors. The motors on this thing are not removable, so this won't be a slider you would buy to operate by pushing the cart by hand, because the 2-axis motion control on this slider is one of its key defining features. There's a motor that pushes the slider back and forth, of course, but on the cart itself is another motorized pan axis. That's the interesting one. But before we go into more detail on that, if you've used a motorized slider before, then chances are one of the first things you would do after powering on the slider is calibrating the endpoints of the slider so that the software knows when to stop the motor so it doesn't drive the cart into the end of the slider. Typically, that's something you would do manually. You would drive the cart manually using the controls to one end, define that, and then drive it to the other end, define that, and then you can start using your slider. On the Shark Slider Nano, that process is completely automatic. There are sensors on the slider itself that let it know when it's about to hit an end and stop it, and every time you power it on, it will calibrate itself. It does take about a whole minute to complete the process, and granted, it is a little annoying to have to go through that after every single power cycle, but at least it can be an unmanned process. You can power it on, leave it there to calibrate and set something else up, and come back to it. Much of the slider's operation is also centered around this touchscreen, and it's actually a very pleasant interface to use because it's actually a 60Hz color IPS screen. And although there is a companion app for this slider called iFootage Moco, it's possible to operate all the features on this slider without having to even use the app. And I think about 90% of the time, everyone's going to be operating this slider in this quick start mode. So what happens in this mode is you press both these buttons down here at the same time, and that brings you into this sort of programming mode. You would see the A and B markers start flashing, so you would use your hand to actually manually push the cart and position it to where you want your slider move to start. You would tap on the flashing A on the screen to record this position as your point A, and then you move it to where you want the motion to end and set that as point B. You press origin to return your cart back to point A, and these two toggles here, this one enables looping, so instead of going from A to B, it keeps repeating between A and B until you stop it. And this other toggle here basically swaps the position of your A and B points. And finally, you would define a duration for your move. That's how long it would take to get from point A to point B. The fastest my setup was able to manage was about 3 to 4 seconds, which is pretty quick. But at this point, all you have to do is hit start and your slider would execute the move for you. Now the slider also uses this dual cart design, so you can place it on a flat surface and it would go along the length of the track like any normal slider, but it does have extended reach if you mount this on a tripod. In tabletop mode, you get about 21 centimeters of travel, but in tripod mounted mode, you get about 42 centimeters, that's twice as much travel. However, the way you mount it will have an effect on your maximum payload. It's rated at 3.5 kilos like this in desktop mode and 1 kilogram less in tripod mode because the motors have to actually work harder in tripod mode to move the mass of the slider itself along with your camera. And I think it's quite important that I emphasize this. This is a slider that works better with lightweight setups. The pan motor in particular, I find to be not as powerful as the main linear motor that moves it along the length of the slider. So if you've got a heavier load or if you're trying to program a faster move, the pan axis might actually take longer to reach its endpoint and that might throw off your framing. And in some cases, I had a setup very similar to this. It's a mirrorless camera, a lens, and a fluid head on the slider, and I did experience some stuttering on the panning motion when executing a medium to high speed move. It's a lot less of an issue if it's a slow move, say 15 seconds and above, but just putting it out there, if you've got a substantial setup on the slider, you might want to combine it with some sort of image stabilization for the best results. Otherwise, you might notice some amount of stutter or jitter, particularly in the panning motion in your shots. That being said, however, if there's no panning motion involved, you can actually push this slider quite far without any issues. One more thing we haven't talked about is how this thing is powered. It runs off the very common Sony NP-F style batteries, but if you plug in a USB power source into the Type-C port that's back here, it will actually charge your battery. That actually comes in really handy for longer sessions such as shooting time lapses, which there is a dedicated mode for as well. There's even a shutter release port right on the cart itself for this exact purpose. And this red adjustment knob you see on the cart is actually a tightness adjustment that I'm really glad iFootage included. You know when you wiggle a slider cart and there's a bit of play, you'll be able to tighten that away on the Shark Nano using that adjustment. There's also a master cart lock that prevents things from moving around when they're not supposed to, for example during transport. It's a little push and turn knob at the end of the slider, and it's actually pretty cool to see how it works by actually jamming into the gears of the slider, kind of like parking gear in a car. And of course, one more burning question: how much is this slider going to cost? iFootage is currently offering this in 2 kits. The standalone slider is $499, and there's also a bundle going for $599. What you get extra in the bundle is a very nice carrying case, an NP-F 750 battery, and also a set of shutter release cables. And for a limited time, they're also including a free smartphone mount with both kits. And if you're interested to get one, I have 2 pieces of good news for you. Number 1, iFootage has reached out to offer viewers of this channel a 10% discount using this epic coupon code Z saved me some cash. It works on purchases from their official US and EU store, links below. And second piece of good news, as long as you've purchased a Shark Slider Nano using that exact coupon code before the 7th of January 2021, you are eligible for the giveaway lucky draw. If you win the draw, iFootage will give you a full refund for your Shark Slider Nano, and you get to keep the slider, of course, so basically you get a free slider. I will be personally announcing the winner of the lucky draw here on this channel on the 7th of January itself, so you've got until then to try your luck on a free slider. There's links to the terms and conditions of the giveaway in the description box as well. And that is all there is for today, so make sure you check out my other videos quickly before my editor decides to